Today I'd like to talk about how to learn a language when you already have an advanced level. My name is Azrin. I run the Calgary Language Nerds. If you'd like to work with myself or any of the instructors on my team to learn any one of over 10 languages that we offer classes for, please go to the link in today's episode description box and you'll be able to see all the information on my website. So as I said, today I'd like to talk about some different ways to learn a language when you already have an advanced level in whatever language you're trying to learn. The biggest thing when you already have an advanced level is you have to start exploring different types of content. I'll give you an example. So in English, I have a very, very advanced level. It is my best language. But yesterday, when I was teaching an academic English class, kind of like tutoring, really, when I was teaching this academic English class yesterday to some native English speakers who I help with their schoolwork, it's a group of them, they're 15 years old. They were using certain terms in English that I actually hadn't heard before. And this happens probably every week. They use certain words and phrases that I haven't heard. Even though I'm a native English speaker, I'm super advanced, they use words and phrases that I don't because of the generational difference. So if I wanted to say, okay, I want to get better at my English, one thing I could do is I could learn English that a younger generation uses. So if I watch a TV show or listen to them talk, and they're using words and phrases I don't know, well, now I would know them and I can actually understand. That's one way for me to improve, quote unquote, my English, even though it's my first language. So that's something you can take that same concept to whatever language you have an advanced level in. You can ask yourself, what topics do you not really know all that much about? Maybe it's health. Maybe it's neuroscience. Maybe it's motorbikes. Maybe it's cars. Maybe it's, who knows what it is. Right? Ask yourself, what are some things you don't know much about? Or better yet, what are some things you'd actually, even in English or your first language, be genuinely interested to learn more about? Maybe you think, I've got a real interest in video editing. I've always wanted to learn that as a skill. Or I've got one of my students who's not quite advanced, but pretty close to upper intermediate level in Spanish. And she's actually been interested to learn more about stand-up comedy, as in how do you perform stand-up? So right now she's actually taking a course, an online course in Spanish about stand-up comedy. And that way she's, getting to use her Spanish, but she's learning a whole bunch of different words and phrases that she didn't know in Spanish because they're about stand-up and she didn't know that many words about stand-up comedy. Does that make sense? Something else you can do as well is watch, on the topic of stand-up comedy, you can actually watch stand-up comedy in the language that you're trying to learn, or rather that you have an advanced level in. Because understanding stand-up comedy, understanding jokes, humor, it's hard. That's actually pretty difficult. So when you're listening to a stand-up bit, or what do you call it? Is it a bit? A bit is the joke. When you're watching stand-up, let's just say that. When you're watching it, and it's not in your first language, you might find it to be quite difficult to understand. Another thing you may want to try listening to or watching would be rap, if that's something that you're into. Rap, especially if it's a rapper who is very good with their words, that's really good at telling stories through their words, using analogies and things of that nature. That's also something that if you just, by studying the lyrics, listening to the lyrics as they go, that is another way that you might be able to keep building on your level far beyond what you currently have. A different variation of rap, if you're like, Azrin, rap's not for me, a different variation would be literature. If you're reading literature, that's another form of a very advanced way to engage with the language that you're trying to learn. Quick story. I did my university degree in French and Spanish. It was a language and literature degree. What that meant is, roughly speaking, the first 2 years were more language focused, and then the second 2 years, third and fourth year, were more focused on literature. So we'd actually read novels and classic poems and things like that, study them, write essays about them. And that's another way for you to take your language level to another, far beyond the advanced level that you already have. Another room for growth that a lot of advanced learners have is pronunciation. Often people have a very advanced level in another language, but the gap that they still have is they don't sound like a native speaker. And so that might be something for you to work on. You may actually want to work on your pronunciation because that's the biggest gap you have. In fact, for very, very advanced speakers, that's often a good mindset to go in with, is to think about, what are the biggest gaps that you have in your level? Yes, you're very advanced, but what are you not that great at that you'd like to be perhaps better at? A good example for me in English, if I compare my French and Spanish, those are my two most advanced languages apart from English, of course. If I think about the things I'm able to do in English that I'm not as capable of doing in French and Spanish, I can make a whole list. I definitely would struggle to make videos or podcasts in French or Spanish. It's harder. It's something that I'm not as practiced with, because even, be able to make videos and podcasts and shorts and things like that in English, that took me years of practice to even do in English. To do it well in English was hard. So I don't have that practice in French and Spanish. Another thing would be related to my work. I do consultations with students, right? New people who want to potentially take classes. I do free consultations. I ask them, I do like a needs assessment. I talk to them about, why they're learning, their level. Like that whole conversation is something I don't have a lot of experience with in French or in Spanish. And that's another room for growth for me. Another one is emails, professional emails. I have written, 50,000 professional emails over the past, 13 years. I don't know how many thousands of emails, but so many, all in English. And it's automatic. If I see a complaint come through, if I see someone inquiring about something, I unconsciously just know what kind of words to use. But in French or Spanish, I don't have those words and phrases and stuff all unconsciously. I often have to think, like, how would I say that? And I have to kind of think about it, right? That's another area for growth. So when I think about things I can do in English that would be harder for me in French and Spanish, I can start to get a list of things that I need to get better at. I think the hardest thing for people that have a very advanced level is it's hard to become a beginner again when you have an advanced level. What does that mean? Well, it's hard to go to, if you're already so advanced in the language, you have a really high level, it's hard to switch your brain around and go back into beginner mode where something's hard again. And you're like, man, it's so, like even today, I actually had the chance to make a video in French. I had the chance to make one. I actually had an idea and I was like, oh, that would be a really cool video to make in French. And I was like, do I want to do that? Because I knew how hard and awkward it would be. I'd have to think about it. I'd have to maybe look up some words. Then I'd feel self-conscious. Then I'd be worried about my accent. Like, is it coming out funny? Then I'd worry about my camera presence and all these things that, I don't worry about those things anymore. Generally, when I speak in really any language, if I were going to make that video in French, I'd have to revisit those emotions that I don't really want to revisit. Does that make sense? So yeah, those are a couple things you can try. Hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me in the comments below, or there's a link in the description box to my website. You can contact me directly through there. My social media platforms are also on that site. Have a great day, and we'll chat later. Bye-bye.